Following the victory at Arcadiopolis, Emperor John Tzimiskes of the Byzantine Empire ordered additional units from the Asia Minor to cross into Thrace and prepare for the upcoming campaign. He also focused on building a robust siege train and gathering supplies to support a strong force aimed at expelling the Rus forces from Bulgaria completely. A significant naval fleet accompanied this expedition, capable of transporting troops, supplies, and providing coastal support or backing the land forces once they reached the Danube. John's main objective was to push the Rus forces back across the Danube, evident from his thorough preparations. Diplomatic efforts were pivotal, leveraging the defeat near Arcadiopolis to persuade the Pechenegs to withdraw their backing. John emphasized his aim to reinstate Boris to the throne. In April of 971, the emperor's army, estimated to have been as large as 30,000 soldiers based on contemporary records, traveled through the Bulgarian frontier regions. Surprisingly, the mountain passes, usually vulnerable points for the Byzantine forces, left undefended, potentially due to the Rus' focus on suppressing a Bulgarian rebellion to the north. The army safely passed through and emerged onto the plain where the Bulgarian capital, Preslav, was situated. Despite brief and violent clashes, the Russian forces were ultimately defeated and forced to retreat. The city was successfully reclaimed, along with the valuable political prize of the deposed Tsar himself. The remaining Rus troops, including those led by Svyatoslav, regrouped in the fortress of Dorostolon on the south bank of the Danube. The ensuing campaign witnessed the emperor's strategic progression northwards. Concurrently, a notable defection of Bulgarians from Svyatoslav's ranks prompted the latter to resort to drastic measures, including the execution of several prominent Bulgars at Dorostolon and the imprisonment of many others. The emperor's advance encountered minimal resistance, as numerous smaller fortifications and strongholds ostensibly defended by Bulgarian forces capitulated without confrontation upon the emperor's offer of terms. However, in the vicinity of Dorostolon itself, a semblance of hostility emerged. A contingent of Rus troops orchestrated an ambush within the dense woodland surrounding the fortress, catching an advanced unit of Imperial cavalry off guard. Subsequently, upon the arrival of the main vanguard alongside the emperor, who had been dispatched ahead for terrain assessment and campsite selection, the discovery of slain comrades prompted swift retaliatory action. Imperial guards were swiftly deployed to purge the wooded area and neutralize the threat, resulting in the capture of several adversaries. As a gesture emblematic of the emperor's stance towards the opposition, the captives were promptly subjected to capital punishment. Upon emerging from the wooded area, the Imperial forces proceeded to establish a fortified base camp, positioning their baggage and siege equipment defensively, complemented by a dedicated detachment for guard duty. Subsequently, scouts returned with intelligence indicating that the Rus forces had assumed a formidable battle formation on the open terrain adjacent to the fortress. Described as an expansive and heavily armed formation, the Rus army awaited the impending imperial assault with confidence, buoyed by their substantial numerical advantage. While specific figures vary across sources, it is evident that the Rus military contingent was significant, having been augmented over the 3-year period of Svyatoslav's activities in Bulgaria. The continual influx of reinforcements, potentially sourced from regions beyond Rus territories, undoubtedly bolstered the original force accompanying Svyatoslav during his initial campaign in 968, resulting in a notable escalation in overall troop strength. As the sun ascended to its zenith, both armies arrayed themselves for the impending confrontation. As the Rus army marched forward in a long, dense line, John, the Byzantine emperor, divided his force into 3 groups and positioned them over the same front. Flanking each wing were reserves of heavily armored cataphract cavalry ready to strike with devastating force when the moment arrived, while the second line was occupied by infantry archers and slingers. They were instructed to shower the enemy forces with a constant volley of missiles as long as they were within range. The tension mounted as the two colossal armies faced off. The Rus did not hesitate, letting out a thunderous battle cry as they surged forward to meet the imperial forces. In the initial clash, the Byzantines managed to momentarily halt the Rus' advance and even breached their shield wall at a few points. However, the Rus quickly regrouped, their disciplined warriors re-establishing the formidable defensive formation that had earned them a fearsome reputation. The battle lines moved back and forth for over an hour until both sides fell back and regrouped, preparing for a fresh assault. The Byzantine forces were able to halt the Russian charge once again and even pushed their line back some distance. But they could not break through the Rus' shield wall, and the Rus were equally determined not to concede defeat. The Rus were determined to maintain their aura of invincibility, while the Byzantines refused to accept defeat at the hands of what they saw as a lesser foe. As the sun began its descent towards the horizon, the stalemate seemed unyielding. It was then that Emperor John, sensing the need for a decisive shift, gave the command to unleash the heavy cavalry and launch a renewed assault. With a thunderous roar, the armored horsemen charged forth, supported by a fresh push from the infantry. The combined might of the Byzantine forces crashed into the Rus' shield wall with relentless force, breaking through their defenses and sending shockwaves through their ranks. The momentum shifted swiftly as the Rus' wings began to bend towards their center under the relentless onslaught. Imperial units surged forward, penetrating deep into the enemy lines as chaos engulfed the battlefield. The Rus' warriors, caught off guard by the ferocity of the assault, started to retreat towards the safety of their fortress. The retreat turned into a rout as the Byzantine forces pressed their advantage, cutting down fleeing Rus soldiers in their desperate bid for refuge within the fortress walls.
Die with honor, men!
Following the decisive victory on the battlefield, the emperor, demonstrating strategic acumen, initiated the withdrawal of his troops, signaling the commencement of preparations for the forthcoming siege of Dorostolon. Historian Leo the Deacon chronicles that as the soldiers regrouped and began their return march towards the base camp, a jubilant victory song resonated among their ranks, echoing the triumph achieved against the Rus forces. For the encampment site, the emperor judiciously selected a low elevation situated at a prudent distance from the fortress. This encampment strategy was characterized by the erection of fortifications, including a protective ditch with earthworks stacked inward. Notably, the troops were directed to arrange their weaponry spears and lances alongside the ditch, forming a formidable barrier, while their shields were systematically positioned, creating an uninterrupted shield wall. Leo the Deacon astutely observes that such an arrangement mirrored the traditional Roman encampment protocol adopted in hostile terrains, underscoring the meticulous attention to defensive fortifications and military organization typical of Byzantine warfare doctrine. As the sun ascended once more, casting its golden rays upon the battleground, the imperial troops embarked on a relentless assault against the formidable fortress of Dorostolon. With strategic precision, they directed attacks at various vulnerable points along the fortress defenses, aiming to weaken the Rus' stronghold. However, the defenders of Dorostolon were well prepared and retaliated fiercely, unleashing a relentless barrage of arrows and stones upon the advancing Byzantine forces. Undeterred by the initial setback, the Byzantine forces persisted in their efforts to breach the fortress defenses. Yet their assaults were met with staunch resistance, making it challenging to gain any substantial ground against the determined defenders. Recognizing the need to reassess their approach, the imperial army eventually withdrew to their fortified camp, although they maintained vigilant surveillance over the fortress, poised for the next opportunity to strike. As dusk approached and the shadows lengthened, a sudden flurry of activity disrupted the calm of the evening. The Rus forces, seizing the moment, launched a daring sortie from Dorostolon, sending a mounted detachment to harass the Roman pickets. This marked the first time the Byzantines encountered the Rus cavalry in action, a momentous event noted by historian Leo. However, the Rus' lack of experience in mounted combat soon became apparent. The Roman cavalry, seasoned in the art of mounted warfare, swiftly countered the enemy's attack. With expert maneuvering and coordinated tactics, the Roman horsemen shattered the Rus' formation, sending them fleeing in disarray back towards the safety of Dorostolon's walls. At this juncture, the emperor's strategic decision seemed to pivot away from direct confrontation with the heavily fortified walls of Dorostolon, opting instead to entice the Rus' forces into open battle. This calculated move aimed to capitalize on the potential for swifter and more decisive victory compared to the alternatives of a frontal assault or a protracted siege against the formidable defenses of the fortress. Despite this approach, the emperor maintained readiness for any scenario that might unfold. Approximately 3 days after the Roman forces encamped near the fortress, a significant development occurred with the arrival of a fleet. This fleet, comprising both logistical supplies and reinforcements, also included warships equipped with liquid fire projectors. This medieval precursor to napalm, ejected from tubes mounted on the bow of these specialized vessels, was not unfamiliar to the Rus. Historical accounts recall how the warships of Svyatoslav's father Igor had succumbed to the devastating effects of this very weapon some 3 decades prior. The arrival of the fleet served multiple strategic purposes. Firstly, it effectively sealed off the Rus forces on the southern bank of the Danube, eliminating any avenues for escape and tightening the encirclement around Dorostolon. This development significantly uplifted the morale of the Roman forces, instilling a sense of assurance and reinforcing their resolve. Simultaneously, it likely instigated a sense of unease and diminished confidence among the Rus troops confined within Dorostolon, as their prospects for relief or retreat dwindled in the face of the tightening blockade. On the day following the arrival of the fleet, Svyatoslav, the Rus leader, rallied his forces for another bold sortie in a bid to engage the Roman forces in open combat. His strategic intent was clear: to break the siege and secure a decisive victory that could shift the momentum of the conflict. As the Rus army sallied forth from Dorostolon, the atmosphere crackled with anticipation, both sides poised for a clash that would shape the course of the siege. The battlefield bore witness to a symphony of war drums and clashing weaponry as the opposing forces met once more. The initial skirmishes saw a tense standoff, with neither side gaining a significant advantage. The Rus warriors, renowned for their martial prowess, held their ground tenaciously, their ranks bolstered by the hope of breaking the encirclement and turning the tide of the siege in their favor. However, the turning point came with the thunderous charge of the Roman heavy cavalry, their formidable iron maces wreaking havoc upon the Rus lines. The sheer ferocity and impact of the cavalry assault threw the Russian formation into disarray, causing them to recoil inward upon themselves. The resounding blows of the iron maces shattered the Rus' defensive formations, leaving chaos and confusion in their wake. Initially, the Rus forces attempted to retreat in some semblance of order, but the relentless pressure and unyielding assault of the Roman cavalry quickly eroded their cohesion. The retreat soon devolved into a frantic rout as panic set in, and the Rus soldiers, overwhelmed by the relentless onslaught, fled in disarray back towards the safety of Dorostolon's formidable defenses. Following the decisive battlefield engagement, the emperor swiftly transitioned to a siege posture, strategically positioning siege weapons around the fortress of Dorostolon. These formidable machines were employed to launch a relentless barrage of projectiles, targeting both the fortress walls and the troops entrenched within. This sustained assault aimed to wear down the defenders and undermine their morale through attrition. In response to the incessant bombardment, which inflicted casualties and dampened morale among the Rus forces, they devised a series of sorties aimed at neutralizing the Roman siege engines and disrupting their siege efforts. One such sortie stands out, where a detachment tasked with guarding a vital emplacement found themselves almost caught off guard. The unfortunate leader of this detachment, Kuakuas, reportedly in a slightly inebriated state following his midday repast, met his demise during the Rus attack. Kuakuas, renowned for his ostentatious and opulent attire, became a target of mistaken identity during the chaos of battle. The Rus warriors, believing him to be the emperor himself due to his conspicuous appearance, severed his head and displayed it on a spear, intending to mock the Romans. However, their intended psychological impact fell short of expectations. Despite the loss of Kurkuas and the Rus' attempts to disrupt the siege machinery, the Roman siege engines remained operational and largely undamaged. The siege persisted, with the Roman forces maintaining their relentless assault on the fortress defenses, undeterred by the Rus' sporadic sorties and attempts at psychological warfare. The ensuing day saw the Russian army emboldened by their previous sortie, once again emerging from Dorostolon to engage the Roman forces. Acknowledging their adversaries' eagerness for battle, the emperor allowed the Rus to organize their battle formation. On the Roman side, preparations were meticulous, with the infantry forming a dense phalanx, the cavalry strategically positioned at the wings partly concealed, and missile troops positioned behind the heavy infantry in the center, ready to unleash a hail of projectiles upon the enemy. As the battle commenced, the clash of arms reverberated across the battlefield. The Rus contingent launched a fierce charge, breaking through the Roman line and inflicting significant casualties. The initial success of the Rus charge seemed to tip the balance in their favor momentarily. However, the tide of battle swiftly turned with a decisive countercharge orchestrated by the Roman cavalry, including elite units from the imperial guards. Led by Anemas, a stalwart member of the emperor's bodyguard, the Roman cavalry surged forward, driving the Rus contingent back and claiming the life of Svyatoslav's second-in-command in the tumult of combat. With their leadership disrupted and their ranks thrown into disarray, the demoralized Rus forces began to falter. Sensing the opportunity, the emperor issued immediate orders for the Roman forces to advance and press the advantage. The disciplined Roman infantry pushed forward relentlessly, overwhelming the retreating Rus line, which fractured and scattered in disarray. The Rus' retreat soon transformed into a disorderly rout as panic gripped their ranks, prompting a hasty withdrawal back to the safety of Dorostolon's protective walls. The Roman forces, buoyed by their success on the battlefield, maintained their cohesion and discipline, consolidating their gains and fortifying their siege positions as they continued their relentless efforts to subdue the fortress. That night unfolded with a poignant scene as the Rus soldiers and their families ventured beyond the fortress gates onto the battlefield. Their purpose was solemn and reverent, to locate and gather the fallen comrades, whose bodies they then placed upon funeral pyres. With solemn rituals and rites, they bid farewell to their fallen warriors, consigning their remains to the purifying flames. It remains ambiguous whether the Roman forces observing the fortress were instructed to abstain from interference or chose to allow this mourning ritual without intervention, as historical accounts do not specify. Subsequently, Svyatoslav, the Rus leader, convened a council of the esteemed warriors to deliberate on their next course of action. Diverse opinions emerged among the council members. Some advocated for a daring breakout attempt via boat, risking confrontation with the vigilant Roman warships patrolling the Danube. Conversely, others proposed initiating negotiations with the emperor, seeking a diplomatic resolution to mitigate further loss of life, considering the formidable challenge posed by the heavily armored Roman cavalry. Despite the varying counsel, Svyatoslav remained steadfast in his resolve, reluctant to pursue either proposed course. With the apparent backing of the majority, he resolved to confront the Roman forces in a final, decisive battle. He articulated this resolve, emphasizing the Rus' warrior ethos of preferring death in battle and the allure of Valhalla over surrender. As Leo the Deacon aptly notes, the Rus soldiers held steadfast to the belief that falling in battle was preferable to captivity, a sentiment deeply ingrained in their cultural ethos. During the same night, a desperate maneuver unfolded as a detachment of Rus soldiers, numbering around 2,000, embarked on small boats from the fortress, aiming to procure essential supplies. They navigated along the southern bank of the river, discreetly landing at a distant point to commence their search for provisions. It is worth noting that the naval detachments tasked with monitoring the river should have detected this movement, as the emperor had explicitly ordered that no Rus individual should be allowed to exit the fortress. Despite the supposed vigilance, the Rus detachment successfully gathered vital sustenance for their besieged comrades. Upon their return journey, they diverged from their initial route, inadvertently stumbling upon a small contingent of Byzantine cavalry soldiers engaged in routine tasks, such as watering their horses and gathering wood. Caught off guard and heavily outnumbered, the unsuspecting Roman troops fell victim to the swift and decisive attack of the Rus forces. Although an alarm was promptly raised, the Rus soldiers managed to escape with their supplies before any interception could occur. The emperor's reaction to this breach in naval vigilance was one of anger and frustration. He viewed the oversight as a significant lapse in discipline, resulting in an avoidable loss of life and enabling the replenishment of enemy supplies, despite the increasingly dire circumstances faced by the besieged Rus forces. In response, the naval commanders faced severe consequences, including the threat of execution should such a critical lapse in surveillance occur again, underscoring the gravity of the situation and the emperor's determination to maintain strict naval discipline during the siege. On a sweltering Friday, the 24th of July, the stage was set for a pivotal confrontation as the Rus army, having spent the day preparing, sallied forth in the late afternoon from the fortress. Their formation was formidable, a deep, solid phalanx shielded by an impenetrable wall of shields bristling with spears. Across the field, the Roman forces stood ready, organized into their standard 3 divisions, with heavy cavalry positioned behind the wings, and the emperor himself commanding from the center with his cavalry reserve. Unlike previous engagements, the battlefield was now situated closer to the fortress, resulting in a tighter front for both armies. Woodland flanked one side, while marshy terrain stretched back from the river on the other, hemming in the combatants. To counter the threat posed by the Roman heavy cavalry, the Rus strategically positioned their archers on the wings, aiming to inflict maximum damage should the cavalry launch an attack. Led by the indomitable Svyatoslav himself, the Rus warriors charged with unparalleled ferocity, crashing against the Roman line with thunderous force. The center of the Roman formation began to buckle under the relentless assault, as the Rus momentum threatened to break through. The Rus archers, skillfully targeting cavalry mounts, caused chaos and disruption among the Roman ranks with their unusually heavy barrage of arrows. As the battle raged on under the scorching sun, the Roman troops valiantly held their ground, but the intense heat and unrelenting Rus attacks took their toll. Sensing the fatigue setting in among his men, the emperor issued a decisive order: the distribution of water mixed with wine to the ranks. This calculated move, likely executed in a rotational manner to maintain battle lines, provided much-needed refreshment to the exhausted imperial troops, revitalizing their resolve and fortitude. As the sun dipped towards the horizon, casting long shadows across the battlefield, the emperor, with keen tactical acumen, recognized the unfavorable positioning of the Roman forces. Despite their resilience, the current disposition limited the effective use of the Roman heavy cavalry, a critical asset in their arsenal. With swift and decisive command, the emperor issued a general withdrawal order, aiming to regroup and reassess the strategy on a broader plane that offered greater maneuverability. The Roman troops executed the withdrawal with remarkable discipline and order, pulling back from the immediate vicinity of the fortress to the expansive plain beyond. This tactical shift provided ample room for maneuvering and facilitated a more effective deployment of the formidable Roman heavy cavalry, crucial in turning the tide of battle. However, amidst the organized retreat, one Roman officer, Theodora of Mystia, found himself isolated and cut off from his unit, a testament to the relentless pursuit of the Rus forces. In a desperate bid for survival, Theodore engaged in a fierce melee, utilizing a Rus corpse as an improvised shield, lifting it by the belt to deflect incoming blows. Despite the perilous situation, Theodore's comrades rallied to his aid, mounting a courageous charge to rescue him from the encircling Rus warriors, ensuring his safe return to the Roman lines. In the midst of this chaotic skirmish, Anemas, already distinguished for his valor, led his unit of elite guards, likely the Athenatoi, to reinforce the faltering Roman line. With unmatched bravery, Anemas engaged the Rus leader in a daring attempt to turn the tide of battle decisively. In a swift and calculated move, Anemas closed in on the Svyatoslav, launching a fierce attack that momentarily brought the Rus leader to the ground. However, Svyatoslav's sturdy armor proved formidable, deflecting the worst of the blows. In a flurry of retaliation, the Rus warriors swiftly closed in on Anemas, their spears and axes finding their mark. Despite his gallant efforts, Anemas fell under the onslaught, a testament to the ferocity and determination of Svyatoslav's warriors. The tumultuous clash continued to rage on the broad plain, each side locked in a relentless struggle for supremacy. The sacrifices and valor displayed by individuals like Theodora of Nisthia and Anemas underscored the intensity and brutality of the conflict, shaping the narrative of courage and sacrifice amidst the chaos of battle. The battlefield lay shrouded in the chaos of conflict, the clash of arms and the cries of warriors mingling with the rumble of thunder echoing through the darkened skies. As the Rus forces renewed their assault with ferocious determination, the Roman line began to buckle under the relentless pressure. In the rear ranks, whispers of uncertainty and wavering resolve spread among some of the cavalry, threatening to unravel the cohesion of the entire formation. Sensing the gravity of the moment, the emperor, a stalwart figure of leadership and resolve, made a fateful decision. With unwavering determination, he marshaled his elite bodyguard, the epitome of loyalty and valor, and committed them to the heart of the fray. With the emperor himself at the forefront, a beacon of courage amidst the storm of battle, the Roman units surged forward, their presence galvanizing the faltering Roman center and steadying their wavering ranks. Yet, as the clash intensified and the fate of the battle hung in the balance, nature itself seemed to take a hand in the unfolding drama. A sudden gust of wind swept across the battlefield, heralding a fierce thunderstorm that lashed rain and wind upon the combatants. The Rus warriors, caught off guard by the unforgiving elements, found themselves at a disadvantage as the wind blew directly into their faces, hampering their vision and coordination. Amidst the tumult, a figure on a white horse emerged at the center of the Roman lines, leading a charge that cut through the Russian shield wall like a thunderbolt. Legends would later weave tales of Saint Theodore's divine intervention, but in reality, it was the emperor himself and his elite guards who launched a decisive charge of the heavy cataphract cavalry. Their disciplined onslaught shattered the Rus' defenses, opening up a breach in their ranks. Simultaneously, on the flank, General Bardas Skleros executed a masterful encircling maneuver with the Roman heavy cavalry, completing an envelopment that drove the Russian wing back onto their beleaguered center. The sudden and coordinated assault threw the Rus' forces into disarray, their lines crumbling under the overwhelming pressure of the Roman onslaught. With the momentum firmly in their favor, the Roman forces surged forward with relentless determination. The Rus' lines dissolved into chaos, and panic spread like wildfire as the defeated warriors fled in desperation towards the safety of the fortress. The thunderous hooves of the victorious Roman cavalry thundered across the battlefield, cutting down fleeing foes with grim efficiency. The aftermath of the battle was a scene of carnage and triumph. The Romans, victorious but weary, surveyed the field strewn with fallen warriors and captured weaponry. The number of Roman casualties was around 350, which seems unlikely but still suggests a significant loss. The Romans were able to seize around 20,000 shields and countless swords from their opponents on the battlefield. This battle signaled the conclusion of Russian efforts to break the siege and expel the Romans. With significant losses and dwindling supplies, Svyatoslav realized he had no choice but to seek terms despite his previous reluctance. The emperor accepted the Rus' proposal for a peaceful retreat, including surrendering Dorostolon intact along with prisoners and plunder. He also agreed to allow the remaining Rus forces to cross the Danube without facing attacks from the feared warships equipped with liquid fire projectors. Additionally, there was an agreement to restore friendly trade relations once Svyatoslav returned home. However, fate took a different turn as Svyatoslav never made it back, meeting his end in an ambush at the mouth of Dnieper by his former Pecheneg allies. With a masterful 4-month strategy, meticulously planned and backed by a highly efficient logistical operation, Emperor John triumphantly defeated one of the most formidable adversaries the Romans had ever encountered. After establishing a formidable garrison in Dorostolon, he returned to Constantinople, where the glorious victory was celebrated with an imperial triumphal procession. The former Tsar Boris was asked to relinquish his crown, and the eastern regions of Bulgaria were incorporated into the empire as a province. The Bulgarian campaign of 971 once again showcased the discipline, organization, and effectiveness of the imperial armies during the latter half of the 10th century.